Hello fellow miniature painters, I'm Crow Cleanbrush, and today I would like to teach you how to paint eyes on your miniatures. Well, if you've been painting miniatures very long, chances are you have come to the point of your miniature where it's time to paint the eyes, and everything went horribly wrong for you at least one time. And I mean, that's hard not to do. These eyes are really tiny on what are already really tiny miniatures. They're hard to see, they're hard to get paintbrushes in. Eyes are just flat out hard to do without a lot of practice and maybe a few simple tricks. And while I can't give you the practice, I can hopefully show you the few simple tricks that will make the daunting task of painting eyes a little bit simpler and a little bit funner. Because in the end, once you get the hang of it, it can actually be a very enjoyable portion of miniature painting, as it really adds a ton of character to the miniature. Is he looking to the side? Is he going to be, kind of shifty-eyed? Is she going to be bright and happy and innocent with huge eyes? It just lets you control so much of the character of the miniature that it's a really fun and worthwhile thing to learn. So, before we get started, we obviously have to pick our colors. Now, as you can see here, I went with my good old Reaper paints once again, and I have pure black. Obviously, we're going to use that for the pupil. I have pure white, which we're going to use for the catch light on the eye, where the eye is reflecting the outside light. I've got leather white because for the whites of the eyes, and the reason I don't use pure white most of the time is people's eyes, the whites of their eyes generally are not pure white, and so adding just a little bit of an off-white color can make them look a little bit more realistic. That being said, sometimes pure white looks good for the white of the eyes, especially if you want your eyes to really pop in almost a cartoony style way. But it can be on like a beautiful woman or something like that, or a really or a character that you just want to have tons of focus on the eyes. It can really help draw a little bit of extra focus to the eyes. So use pure white for the whites of the eyes very sparingly. And then, because I have this nice fearsome vampire, of course he's going to have red eyes. So I grab two iris colors. I grab a iris shade color and then an iris highlight color. Depending on the color of the eyes that you pick, you may not be able to tell the difference between your shade and your highlight colors when you paint them. It's just, the area is just too small. So you need to pick a very big contrast between your shade and your highlight iris colors. But if you're already going for a fairly bright eye, you may not really need the darker shade. So just decide for yourself what you need as far as those colors are concerned. As far as paint consistency goes, our paint's going to be just a little bit more watery than we would use for layering or blending. And the reason that I do that is because if your paint is too thick, you're going to create texture on the eyeball, and then that's going to be really frustrating. That is my single biggest gripe about painting eyes, is that since I'm going back and forth fairly quickly in a fairly small area, if I'm taking too long, I'll start to build up a texture, and then it's really hard to move forward from that. So try to minimize your strokes in the eye area and use thinner than you normally would paint to help reduce the texturing of the paint. That being said, make sure your paint is not so watery that it just flows through the entire eye socket, or you'll have another annoying problem. And then the last preparatory thing to really discuss when painting faces is, what order do I paint the face in? Do I paint the eyes and then the flesh? Or do I paint the flesh and then the eyes? It's hard to tell here because I kind of have a bloodless, pasty vampire lord. But his face is painted. And a lot of painters will recommend that you paint the face first and then the eyes to prevent slopping onto the eye while you're painting the face. But I usually tend to work the other way around, to paint the eyes first and then the face, so that when I'm painting the eyes, I don't slop on the face. So it's kind of whatever you feel you can reach better needs to dictate what order you paint things in. And as you can see, because my miniature, one side of his face is so far into his cowl, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to reach that side of the face, so I did the face first while I could slop all over the empty eye socket, and then I started on the eyes. So enough background. Let's actually put some paint on a paintbrush and get started. As you can see, his eye sockets right now are very, very dark. And I do this before I start any eye. The first step is I paint a very dark, usually liner color, usually Reaper's blue liner or Reaper's brown liner, into the eye socket so the whole thing is black. This accomplishes, this mainly is the easiest way to really line your eyes and make them pop. If you don't do this step and you just skip straight to the white color, the eyes are going to feel like they blend in with the rest of the face, and they're not going to feel like they stand out enough. Unfortunately, I did do that step yesterday, so I can't show you the lining of the eyes, but basically you do exactly what you do, what I'm going to show you to do when you paint the whites of the eyes, only with a darker color, and you let it go a little bit farther. So it's really a very uncomplicated step. So, ready for the whites of the eyes? Now we're going to take our leather white and we're going to go ahead and get our paintbrush ready. So, the first most important thing when you're getting your paintbrush ready is the tip of the paintbrush. And as you can see here, if I make sure to get things the right distance away, maybe. This paintbrush has been sitting in my brush cup for a while and doesn't have a very good tip on it. It is a Raphael 8404 series paintbrush, and it is in size 0, which, as I understand, is fairly equivalent to the Winsor & Newton size 1. So you can use a big brush for this. Never be deceived into thinking that you have to use like a brush with two little hairs on it, because once you baby your brush into shape, and the way I do that, I'll show you real quick, is I wet the brush and then I make a little V with my fingers in a paper towel and I just pull it through. And I'm not really like squeezing, I'm not really applying pressure, I'm kind of just guiding the paintbrush through. And when all is said and done, you end up with a nice sharp paintbrush point. And now you can see that comes down to a razor fine point, and that is what we need. If you use a really tiny paintbrush while painting eyes, you're actually going to shoot yourself in the foot, because acrylic miniature paints dry very, very quickly. So if you have very, very little paint on your brush, you're going to run the risk of it drying before you can get your paintbrush from your palette to your miniature, which I used to have happen to me all the time when I was painting with tiny brushes. So now I use a bigger brush, but I only load it a little bit, and the extra water in the bristles keeps the paintbrush wet long enough, or it keeps the paint wet long enough to get to the miniature. So okay, let's go ahead and load the paintbrush. I'm gonna, since I messed up my tip there a little bit while I was talking to you guys, I'm gonna reshape it here. And now I'm gonna load it with paint. And when I load it with paint, I only load it about a third of the way. Here, I gotta give you a backdrop apparently. I only load it about, a quarter of the way up the bristles, and then I wipe off most of it on my thumb, so that the bristles just glisten instead of look wet with paint. Now, I have already waited too long, and this paint is going to have started to dry, and so if I tried to put this paint on the miniature right now, it wouldn't work. It would start to clump up. So now I'm going to clean my paintbrush entirely. This is going to be a theme throughout this. I'm going to clean my brush entirely, dip it in the paint fresh, and then go straight to the miniature. I find that painting eyes is a lot about the prep that you put into it, and not so much, well, I shouldn't say not so much about the actual brushwork, because that is incredibly important, but just the preparatory steps are what win or lose painting eyes for you. So, okay, my brush is now clean, and it is now loaded with paint to my liking. Now let's see if I can do this, because it's going to be quite difficult to make both of us be able to see. And you want to use the tip of your paintbrush because it fits so nicely towards the nose, and just drag away. Notice that I didn't get the entire area. That's okay. I'm just not going to be able to reach this side, this bottom side of the eye with my paintbrush held this direction. I'm going to have to stop, clean my brush, wet it again, flip over the miniature, and reach the eye again. So, real quickly. Getting new paint. Wiping off on my finger. Flipping the miniature over, because we really just have to rely on the sharpness of the tip of the paintbrush to get into those cracks and crevices that we can't reach. Not too many strokes, like I said, because we don't want to mess things up. Okay. That's pretty good. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to do the other eye because there's no way I'm going to be able to reach that one on film. And then we'll do the irises. I now have the whites of the eyes on both of the eyes, but we've left just a little bit of dark paint liner around the eye. It really makes the eye pop. So even though the white of the eye is very similar in color to the rest of the face, you can really see things. Now you want to take your pure black, and what I like to do when I'm trying to find the iris, or like define where the iris is going to be, I take the miniature and I paint almost just like a little strip downward wherever I want the iris to be, and then that will define kind of a starting point, and then I flesh it out a little bit to both sides. That helps me pick the position and then slowly fix the shape of the iris. And you can let it be fairly tucked into both eyelids, and it still looks pretty nice, is what I found. So you don't have to make this like a perfect circle or anything like that. Just get a black splotch somewhere near the center of the eye with slightly rounded sides. This miniature has curved eyes, so that's a little bit easier. At the same time, the curved eye, the actual realistic curvature to the eyeball makes this a little bit more difficult at times, because the miniature will look different from different angles. So really turn the miniature in your hand and figure out if the eye is looking right. If you nail this step, all the other steps will be a lot easier after that point. So let's go ahead and get some paint on the paintbrush. Just like last time, we just get, maybe a quarter of the bristles loaded and wipe off most of the paint, and then we go in for the kill. So I'm gonna have to really lean in here, so I don't want to mess up your view. And since I've already painted the face, I gotta be careful not to get the face again here. I'm gonna have him kind of looking off to his side a little bit here. So we've started to define the location of the eye, but it looks really goofy. It looks like he's staring up into space, right? And that's because I haven't pulled the iris down far enough, but I've done all that I want to do with this brush full of paint. I'm gonna clean the paintbrush again, and then because I can't really reach down to his bottom eyelid with the angle I have, without risking getting paint all over his cheek, I'm going to flip him over and flesh out the rest of the eye from the other direction. There we go. Now we start to have an eye. It's a little skinny at the top, so I'm going to fix that up. And then I'm going to get the other eye real quick. And the trick with, one of the big tricks with painting eyes is paint one eye holding the miniature right side up, and paint the other eye holding the miniature upside down. The change in the angle will help you keep track of just making sure that the irises are both pointed in the same direction, and will prevent cross-eyed miniatures, which is an easy thing to do. Yeah, but it'll help you avoid that. So as you can hopefully see here, I got both irises put together, and I elected to have him looking fairly straight ahead, kind of an intense look for him. Usually, a rule of thumb is if you want the eyes to look really neat, I guess if you want an easier expressionful look, don't paint them looking straight ahead. Paint them looking off to the side. Usually it's a little bit easier to line them up, and if you paint them right in the center and you do it wrong, you're just learning, a lot of the times they'll end up with a really, really zombified look. This miniature kind of dictated to me that he needed to be looking dead ahead, and he just kind of has a nice intense face, so it kind of works out for him. But usually I paint my eyes slightly looking in a direction. So there's just a little tidbit of painting wisdom for you to consider. But now it's time for us to go ahead and start doing the iris. So let's add some life to these eyes. The trick with the irises is you don't have to paint like a nice round, donut shape like a real person's iris, because that would be really, really hard, even if you had some of the best brush control in the world. Instead, the eye is such a small area already, we're going to kind of fake the iris effect with just a big dot of our iris color. We can later go back in and, if I'm going to make a nice, ring-shaped iris, I will put a dot of my iris color over the whole eye, and then I will put a little black dot in the center. So we'll see how it looks after we've started to kind of fake our irises, and if necessary we'll go in and put that black dot in. So let's go ahead and load up our paintbrush again. Let's see here. It is even harder to film painting eyes than it is to paint them, I think, so this has been quite the challenge, but we're getting there. Alright, so I've got my paintbrush loaded once again. For this time I'm using my my crimson red, and I'm gonna come in at the eye from a little bit of an angle here, hopefully, so we can both see. And I'm just gonna put a big red dot near the bottom left corner of his eye, which is gonna be really hard for me to give you a good angle at this. We'll try. Actually, I take that back. Just kind of coat the whole eye with this red, but focus towards the bottom. You can't really see anything right now, but that's okay. This is supposed to be subtle. Okay, there we go. Both eyes have a slight red tint to it, you can see right now, but it's kind of focused a little bit downward and towards the corner, and you're going to see why I focused it in the corner as soon as I put the catch light, the little bit of reflection of light on the top of the eye. Essentially, the eyes can be thought of as gems, so opposite where the highest point of light is, you're going to see kind of a little bit of a really bright transparent color. And we're going to add the pinnacle of that effect now with our very bright brilliant red. So when I'm going to load my paintbrush up with the brilliant red, and this time we're going to kind of do like last time. We're going to kind of do like we did with the shade color, only we're going to focus a small little pinprick of this. One of the biggest secrets in painting eyes is you don't need to follow the actual shape of a real eye. You just need to sell the effect. And since the eyes are so small, oftentimes a dot will sell an effect that you wouldn't be able to get normally, or that would be hard to get if you tried to like paint the whole donut. So let's keep this in focus for both of us here. Now, if you're starting to try to paint and nothing is coming off, that's a sure sign that you waited too long to get your paintbrush from the miniature to the eye. If I was painting another area of the miniature, I wouldn't notice because I've got enough wet paint deeper in the bristles, but on the tip it's dry, so it's not going to come off. So I need to re-wet my paintbrush and try this again. We can still both see, kind of. I'm kind of pulling it along the bottom of his eye, trying to make it appear to be a ring when it's not actually a ring. As you can see, I didn't quite succeed, so I'm going to go back with a little bit of the black and I'm going to kind of make a dot in the center of the eye, and that will help us make a little crescent of the red by half covering that little red strip. Okay, so that took a few more rounds of playing with things, but hopefully you'll agree with me that that it looks not half bad right now. And actually, we're kind of getting a faked catchlight effect just from the light glinting off his eyes. But really, the eyes come hugely to life when you add that final catchlight. So that's what we're going to do now. So this time, pay extra special attention to the consistency of your paint. Since you're trying to make such a small dot for the catchlight, it really is important that your paint be watery enough not to dry on your brush. And go ahead and get your paint, get it ready, and just put a dab in the corner, the upper right corner of his eye. Not bad, but I think it's going to have to be a little bit bigger. Let's see if I can show it to you. You can see a little bit of one, but it's not quite big enough yet. It makes the eye look very gem-like, but we need just a little bit more. So a little bit bigger catchlight. Let's try it round 2. This is where the curved nature of the eye is really biting me. But there we go. That's a little bit better. Now I just need to add one to the other eye. So there you have it. There's both eyes with their catchlights. And they look shiny even in the dark because you can see the left eye is kind of in shadow. But it looks nice and shiny and intense from multiple angles, right? Now, if anything, the face still looks a little funny. And the question for that is, well, why? And I believe the answer is, I still haven't painted his eyebrows. And eyebrows play a huge portion of, a huge role in determining the expression of the miniature. So I'm going to real quickly paint the eyebrows, and then I'm going to show you the finished results. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's roughly how I approach most of the eyes that I paint. I'm sorry for the poor camera angles, and I hope that it was still informative despite how difficult it was to film and probably to see. But just with eyes, they're frustrating. Practice makes perfect, so don't worry if the first few sets of eyes or the first few dozen sets of eyes, like it was in my case, just don't work out for you. Just keep at it, keep practicing, keep your paints thin, and fake eyes. Don't try to paint perfect donut irises and everything else like that. And thanks a bunch for watching. I hope that was helpful to you, and let me know what you'd like to see next as far as tutorials go, and I will see what I can do. Thanks again.